The meridian glowed under crystal chandeliers, where laughter and quiet deals blended with the clink of fine glassware. Waiters moved with precision, balancing plates like choreography. Among the polished crowd sat Carter Vale, heir to Vale Holdings, lounging in his tailored arrogance. His designer watch caught the light as if it deserved its own spotlight dot at his table. A woman scrolled her phone, bored. "Service is painfully slow," she murmured. Carter raised a brow, then snapped his fingers. "Some people don't belong in high-end work," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Emily Torres, steady despite the sting in her chest, set down their plates with a practiced smile. "Thank you for your patience, sir." But Carter's voice cut through her calm patience. "That's what broke people say." His date looked away, uncomfortable. Emily turned to leave, then it happened. A sharp sound cracked through the music. His hand against her face. The restaurant froze. Glasses trembled on tables. A gasp rippled across the room like a wave against marble. Carter leaned back, unbothered. "Next time, get it right." His smirk deepened as the Mactor D rushed over, not to him, but to Emily. "Let's step aside," the manager whispered, eyes darting toward the corner there. A man in an unassuming gray suit had paused his meal. He wasn't filming. He was observing, every motion, every word. His gaze held the quiet weight of command. Later, the world would know him as FBI Director Daniel Torres. But tonight, he was simply a brother watching his sister be humiliated and taking mental notes that would soon rewrite the balance of power. Hours earlier, the meridian woke like a careful machine. Linen carts whispered down hallways, ovens exhaled their first breath, and a floor manager drew invisible boundaries with a clipboard. Cameras blinked above chandeliers, angled to flatter guests, not staff. NDA letters waited behind the hostess stand, pens tethered to a marble tray. The message was unmistakable: what happens to the powerful stays polished. Carter Vale arrived for a reservation he didn't need, trailing the scent of new leather and postponed consequences. Son of Richard Vale, builder of mirrored towers. He carried a surname that opened doors and an inner script that slammed them. Tutors praised his potential, consultants taught him to command rooms, and private coaches sold him a definition of strength: never yield, never wait, never apologize. Control was the brand, image was the inventory. Yet his confidence was brittle, a glass sculpture. He checked mirrors when no one watched, corrected servers for sport, and measured respect in response time. Every glance that didn't linger felt like theft. His date liked the reservation more than the company. He liked hearing his own certainty. Emily Torres started her double shift on a quiet prayer and a practice stretch. Nursing textbooks waited in her locker beneath a photo strip, Daniel's arm across her shoulder. "My brother's somewhere in D.C., she told co-workers with a shrug that concealed pride. On the schedule board, her name appeared 3 times, stitched between banquets and a fundraiser. She tied her apron, checked the floor map, and slipped into the current. Rush hour at the Meridian was choreography without applause. Bread baskets replenished themselves, cutlery aligned to compass points. Emily moved through it like a conductor's small nods, a lifted brow, a fingertip on the ticket rail to nudge timing. New hires watched how she steadied trays with the heel of her hand, how she listened without flinching when impatience spiked. Grace under pressure was her reputation. Reliability was her anchor. Behind the scenes, the place ran on favors and quiet compromises. A senator preferred table 9. An investor demanded the skyline corner. The owner collected compliments like coins, and surveillance angles wrote private history wide on arriving moguls, narrow on the people serving them. If a plate fell, the sound died quickly. If a voice rose, walls absorbed context. Carter's party flagged the host before they were fully inside. The way people wave at taxis and choose the destination later. He wanted the booth with a view, then changed his mind for visibility. His watch face lit and dimmed, a lighthouse reassuring him. When the sommelier described vintages, he repeated the last phrase louder, testing its authority. The city seemed to tilt an inch toward his approval. Emily clocked him on the second pass, another high-maintenance table sewn into an already tight weave. She adjusted the route to spare a new server the collision. Deep breaths, small plates, she whispered, a mantra disguised as logistics. Ticket times tightened. The oven hummed. Steam lifted like council rising. In the locker room, between turns, she tapped Daniel's photo and felt steadiness travel her spine. He taught her that talent is quiet until challenged, and that courage doesn't need a badge to exist. Still, she smiled at the memory of him in a gray suit, outlining choices like lanes on a road. Follow the rules, gather facts, trust process. Out on the floor, the orchestra swelled. The city's elite arranged themselves in mirrors and silver. Title met talent in the narrow space between a demand and a reply, and the night inched toward a moment that would decide which one truly held the room. The dinner rush crested like a tide, and Emily rode its rhythm. Carter's table had been calibrated to the minute. Amused Bouch, the Vinci repeated louder. The main arriving on cue. His date touched the rim of her plate, drew back her fingers, and frowned. It's not hot, she said. Not unkindly, simply tired of pretending. Emily leaned in. I'll replace it right away. Carter's chair sighed as he turned. Of course you will. Did they not cover temperature in whatever school you almost finished? A few nearby faces stiffened. A spoon paused midair. The kitchen will refire, Emily said, steady. 2 minutes for the sauce, 5 for the entree. He smirked, tasting the attention. Hear that tone? That's the sound of people who think a uniform equals expertise. Don't lecture me in my booth. Another waiter drifted nearer, ready to help. Carter flicked a dismissive hand without looking. We're being handled. Emily kept her voice quiet. The way you calm a skittish room. I'm here to make this right. My father funds entire wings of hospitals, he said. If I want this table replaced with people who know their place, I snap. See, he snapped, crisped out. The music thinned. Emily lifted the plate, the heat fading against her palm. I'll be right back. Try using both ears when I speak, he added louder. Maybe they teach that where you're from if you got that far. A soft gasp from table 9. A phone rose, recording. Emily turned, apology already forming, dignity intact because she chose it. Sir, eyed his hand cut the air and met her cheek. A small, hard sound. Glass chimed. The room fell into the kind of silence that remembers itself. Carter leaned back, unbothered, as if swatting away a gnat. Next time, don't bring cafeteria food for a breath. No one moved. Then the manager materialized, all smile, no spine. Emily, let's step aside to discuss. The words were memorized. A policy recited to the wrong person. She steadied her tray on the service ledge, feeling the cool edge under her fingertips. Are you asking him to step aside too? We value our guests, the manager said, eyes skittering toward the Vale's booth. Please, Carter's smirk returned, practiced as a signature. People like her should remember their place. The sentence hung heavier than the slap. From the corner, a man in a gray suit held still, noting the geometry of the moment, the camera angle. The witness at table 12, the second hand on the wall clock. He stored details. Emily exhaled slowly, as she'd learned in exam labs when monitors screamed and hands needed to be steady. I'll give my statement, she said. She nodded to the date, who couldn't meet her eyes, and walked toward the hallway where NDA letters waited like folded umbrellas. In the manager's office. A document open, incident report #M-7 for 2. Fields filled quickly. Time. Location, staff involved, guest dissatisfaction. The word assault didn't appear. We'll review internally, the manager murmured, saving to a local folder named archive_temp. Meanwhile, a customer's clip left the restaurant at the speed of disgust. The angle was imperfect but undeniable. A uniformed woman, a wealthy hand, a snap, a strike. By closing, the file had vanished from the shared drive. By morning, the report's link returned an error, not found. The cheek bruise would fade. What lingered was the choreography of cowardice, the way the room had swallowed its outrage and called it decorum. That was the wound she carried back onto the floor, not the pain, but the proof that silence can be louder than any slap. Escalation, power imbalance. 800 words be morning. The Meridian's hush had returned, linen replaced. Mirrors polished, but the tension lingered like smoke. The official incident report had evaporated overnight. In its place came in a mail from corporate HR, pending review, shift suspended for employee Torres. No reason cited, no apology offered. The bruised cheek was invisible under makeup, but the bruise on record would stay. Quiet and administrative. Richard Vale read about the viral video before breakfast. The headline was blunt: Millionaire's son slaps waitress in downtown hotspot. Within the hour, he was on the phone with the restaurant's owner. Contain it, he said. My boy's future doesn't get decided by clickbait. The owner, aware that half his investors were Richard's golf partners, promised media management. By noon, the video had disappeared from the restaurant's tagged location feeds. Copyright claims, privacy complaints, and takedown notices swept the internet clean. Yet the clip lived in phones, copied and resent through encrypted chats. Carter woke up to trending notifications and a father's fury. You'll issue a statement, Richard commanded. We'll control the narrative before they control us. Hours later, a new post surfaced, a heavily edited video showing Carter flinching backward as Emily's arm moved, cut mid-frame to imply aggression. Captions read, entitled Staff Attacks Customer Over Temperature Complaint. Hashtag spread faster than truth. In the comments, defenders and critics collided. At the Meridian, Emily checked the schedule and saw her name erased. She sat in the break room's quiet glow, the vending machines hum her only company. Her co-workers hovered, sympathetic but cautious. You should sue. One whispered. Make them pay. I can't afford to lose the jobs, Emily said. And lawsuits need lawyers. That night, she filled out a complaint form for the City Employee Rights Commission. The form's language was polite to a fault boxes, drop-down menus, and an automated message, response time, 30 to 45 business days. She clicked submit, hearing the hollow ping that sounded like finality. By contrast, Carter's father's office pulsed with phone calls and crisis managers. We'll say the staff violated service protocol, one consultant suggested. Emphasize Carter's stress disorder, deflect intent. Richard nodded, pen tapping like a metronome of control. We'll donate to a charity, something with optics. He'll apologize on paper. Meanwhile, Daniel Torres sat in a conference room in D.C., mid-briefing. His aide handed him a tablet with the headline "Rich Kid Humiliates Waitress." The thumbnail froze him, a frame of the Meridian's marble bar, a flash of Emily's hair. He blinked once, twice. The room's noise faded. Pause the presentation, he said quietly. His deputy hesitated. Sir? Daniel set the tablet flat. That's my sister. The next morning, his request went through internal channels as an on-site integrity audit. Under a federal hospitality grant, a routine field inspection. No one questioned it. He boarded the first flight out, the briefcase by his side, not for show this time, but for chain of custody protocols. Back in the city, Emily's inbox filled with silence. HR declined comment pending outcome. Her hours were replaced with a standby schedule, no pay. No schedule rights, no official termination. Her landlord's reminder email followed 2 days later. Carter, meanwhile, treated the scandal like a game. He dined elsewhere, smirked at whispers, and told friends it was overblown. He liked repeating the phrase, I handled it. What he didn't notice was the quiet reappearance of unmarked sedans outside the Meridian. Federal inspectors don't wear uniforms, but they do carry long memories. By the week's end, Daniel sat at a booth in the same restaurant under a pseudonym reservation. He ordered coffee, observed workflow, timing, interactions. Staff didn't recognize him. He liked it that way. When the manager passed, Daniel noted the hesitation in every sentence, signs of pressure, concealment, fear. He'd seen this pattern before, small institutions bending under invisible weight. The tension between power and process crystallized there, one side armed with influence, the other with evidence waiting to be gathered. Emily didn't yet know that justice had quietly boarded a flight in her defense. And Carter didn't know that the most dangerous man in the room wasn't holding a camera. He was holding authority wrapped in patience. The stage was set. Money had tried to rewrite the story. Procedure was about to reclaim it. By morning, the Meridian's hush had returned, linen replaced, mirrors polished, but the tension lingered like smoke. The official incident report had evaporated overnight. In its place came in a mail from corporate HR, pending review, shift suspended for employee Torres. No reason cited, no apology offered. The bruised cheek was invisible under makeup, but the bruise on record would stay. Quiet and administrative. Richard Vale read about the viral video before breakfast. The headline was blunt: Millionaire son slaps waitress in downtown hotspot. Within the hour, he was on the phone with the restaurant's owner. Contain it, he said. My boy's future doesn't get decided by clickbait. The owner, aware that half his investors were Richard's golf partners, promised media management. By noon, the video had disappeared from the restaurant's tagged location feeds. Copyright claims, privacy complaints, and takedown notices swept the internet clean. Yet the clip lived in phones, copied and resent through encrypted chats. Carter woke up to trending notifications and a father's fury. You'll issue a statement, Richard commanded. We'll control the narrative before they control us. Hours later, a new post surfaced, a heavily edited video showing Carter flinching backward as Emily's arm moved, cut mid-frame to imply aggression. Captions read, entitled Staff Attacks Customer Over Temperature Complaint. Hashtags spread faster than truth. In the comments, defenders and critics collided. At the Meridian, Emily checked the schedule and saw her name erased. She sat in the break room's quiet glow, the vending machine's hum her only company. Her co-workers hovered, sympathetic but cautious. You should sue, one whispered. Make them pay. I can't afford to lose the jobs, Emily said. And lawsuits need lawyers. That night, she filled out a complaint form for the City Employee Rights Commission. The form's language was polite to a fault boxes, drop-down menus, and an automated message, response time, 30 to 45 business days. She clicked submit, hearing the hollow ping that sounded like finality. By contrast, Carter's father's office pulsed with phone calls and crisis managers. We'll say the staff violated service protocol, one consultant suggested. Emphasize Carter's stress disorder, deflect intent. Richard nodded, pen tapping like a metronome of control. We'll donate to a charity, something with optics. He'll apologize on paper. Meanwhile, Daniel Torres sat in a conference room in D.C., mid-briefing. His aide handed him a tablet with the headline "Rich Kid Humiliates Waitress." The thumbnail froze him, a frame of the Meridian's marble bar, a flash of Emily's hair. He blinked once, twice. The room's noise faded. "Pause the presentation," he said quietly. His deputy hesitated. "Sir?" Daniel set the tablet flat. "That's my sister." The next morning, his request went through internal channels as an on-site integrity audit. Under a federal hospitality grant, a routine field inspection. No one questioned it. He boarded the first flight out, the briefcase by his side, not for show this time, but for chain of custody protocols. Back in the city, Emily's inbox filled with silence. HR declined comment pending outcome. Her hours were replaced with a standby schedule, no pay. No schedule rights, no official termination. Her landlord's reminder email followed 2 days later. Carter, meanwhile, treated the scandal like a game. He dined elsewhere, smirked at whispers, and told friends it was overblown. He liked repeating the phrase, "I handled it." What he didn't notice was the quiet reappearance of unmarked sedans outside the Meridian. Federal inspectors don't wear uniforms, but they do carry long memories by the week's end. Daniel sat at a booth in the same restaurant under a pseudonym reservation. He ordered coffee, observed workflow, timing, interactions. Staff didn't recognize him. He liked it that way. When the manager passed, Daniel noted the hesitation in every sentence, signs of pressure, concealment, fear. He'd seen this pattern before, small institutions bending under invisible weight. The tension between power and process crystallized there, one side armed with influence, the other with evidence waiting to be gathered. Emily didn't yet know that justice had quietly boarded a flight in her defense. And Carter didn't know that the most dangerous man in the room wasn't holding a camera. He was holding authority wrapped in patience. The stage was set. Money had tried to rewrite the story. Procedure was about to reclaim it. Daniel returned to the Meridian in a navy blazer that said "money" without bragging. He introduced himself as an investor considering a hospitality roll-up. The kind of man managers over-explain things to. He didn't flash a badge. He flashed patience. Coffee he didn't drink cooled beside a notebook. Names, stations, gaps. He mapped the room against the previous week's memory, counting cameras. He asked for a tour, smiling the harmless smile of capital. The manager obliged, nervous charm coding every sentence. "We pride ourselves on consistency," he said, skipping the hallway where incident reports live. The logbook shelf held binders by quarter. Cuda had a fresh creased dot in the service alley. He met a dishwasher on break who kept his eyes down until Daniel asked about nitron schedules. The young man glanced at the ceiling camera and gave times like puzzle pieces. A hostess admitted the policy: if a guest complains, staff step aside first. A bartender remembered the sound of glass after the slap. The way laughter retracted like a hand from flame. The wall clock ticked once, audibly, insistently. Emily arrived early, uniform neat. Dignity gathered like hairpin for work. She accepted his offer to sit, not to be rescued. "I don't want anyone ruined," she said. "I want what happened named. And my hours back." Daniel nodded. Her sentence steadied him more than any outrage. His assistant, Mara, worked the other flank. She served a subpoena to the third-party storage vendor used for CCTV backups, then cross-checked some hashes with what the Meridian produced. Metadata told a cleaner story than statements. To files truncated, 3 file names altered. Deletion events within 24 hours after her complaint submission timestamp. Once a civil rights claim exists, tampering rides the federal rails. Back at a rented workspace, Daniel's world turned into a montage of discipline. Gloved hands eased USB drives into labeled pouches. Time codes from phones met the restaurant's feeds frame by frame. Chain of custody forms thudded onto the table and came back stamped, verified. A map of the dining room bloomed with dots for witnesses. A separate sheet listed contact numbers from reservation logs and credit slips, all handled under warrant. He returned that evening to test a hunch. The server pathway between the bar and booth 6 created a blind seam the house cameras missed. But a tourist at table 12 had filmed steadily, misframed but faithful. Daniel secured the original file, not a screen recording, preserving EXIF data like an oath. News of an unscheduled federal inquiry reached Richard Vale in a boardroom of glass and green juice. His counsel urged calm. His pulse urged calls. Richard dialed the owner first, then a congressman who owed him a fundraiser, then the PR team that had polished Carter's edits. Pressure traveled down the line to managers who had learned to mistake hurry for control. Carter scoffed online, posting quotes about trial by media. Mockery was his currency. Mastery answered in silence. Daniel filed notices, preservation letters to the corporate parent, a hold-on-device wipes for the HR director and night supervisor, and a request for the restaurant's deletion policy with revision history. He didn't warn. He documented. Emily watched the room operate around her. Same chandeliers, same smiles. Except now the edges felt measured. She delivered plates, collected thanks, endured looks, and inhaled enough resolve to last the shift. When Daniel passed her station, he said only, "We're closer." Closer meant the story was almost ready to tell itself through receipts, through timestamps, through the quiet truth that survives edits. Money had written a draft. Evidence was sharpening a pen. The conference room at the Meridian felt smaller than usual. The walls had no windows, only reflections. At one end of the table sat the restaurant's owner, posture collapsing into politeness. Beside him, the HR representative stacked forms she would never reference again. Richard Vale occupied the head seat by habit, his cufflinks glinting like punctuation marks. Carter lounged 2 chairs down, arrogance rehearsed but cracking at the edges. Then Daniel entered. Not rushed, not loud, simply present. His voice carried a precision that made introductions unnecessary. He placed a slim folder on the table, each document tabbed, numbered, aligned. "Good morning," he began evenly. "We're here under a compliance review regarding data handling and workplace integrity." The owner smiled too quickly. "Of course, we're happy to cooperate. Routine housekeeping, I imagine?" Daniel met his eyes. "Director Daniel Torres, Federal Bureau of Investigation." "This isn't housekeeping." He placed his credentials on the table, the badge catching the light. "We're investigating potential evidence tampering in connection with an assault involving employee Emily Torres." Silence pressed against the room. Carter's smirk dissolved. Richard's jaw tightened. Daniel nodded to Mara, who rolled in a small projector. "We'll begin with unaltered footage recovered from off-site backups." The lights dimmed, and the screen flickered to life. The scene unfolded without cuts, the meal complaint, Carter's mockery, the slap, the collective hush. Gasps filled the space that money usually occupied. Daniel let the clip end on the freeze-frame. Carter's hand midair. Emily's face turned. Shock written in light. "This," Daniel said, "is the original time-stamped recording. Now, here's the version distributed by the Vale family's PR team." He switched feeds. The doctored clip appeared cropped, reversed, context erased. Note the metadata. Edit timestamp. 48 minutes after the initial file deletion from the restaurant's drive. Mara laid printed spreadsheets on the table. Hash comparisons, deletion logs, email excerpts. Highlighted lines read, "Contain the narrative. Remove emotional cues." Another, "Legal exposure minimal if we shift tone to mutual misunderstanding." Richard leaned forward. "Director, this can be settled. We'll donate." Daniel cut him off softly. "Justice isn't for sale. Process is protection for everyone." His words carried the calm of finality. Carter's color drained. "I didn't mean it was a mistake, just heat of the moment." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "Mistakes end when they're owned, not when they're hidden." He turned to the HR representative. "You logged incident report hashtag M-742. Correct?" Her pen trembled. "It wasn't in the official folder." "That's because it was renamed and moved to an access restricted directory labeled archive_temp, a mislabeling that violates Federal Labor Data Retention Policy." He set another form down. "Here's the system audit confirming manual override by your credentials at 11:47 p.m. the night of the assault." The owner swallowed audibly. "We were told to minimize exposure. Legal advice from the Vale legal team." Daniel finished. "Whose emails, by the way, use private servers for corporate correspondence." Another procedural breach. Receipts piled, each heavier than the last. Deleted files. Falsified timestamps off record directives. The room's air thickened with the sound of consequence. Finally, Daniel folded his hands. "Emily Torres has not filed civil suit. She only requested her record cleared and her hours restored. The federal law requires we pursue obstruction when evidence in an act of discrimination or assault case is destroyed." He rose, leaving his badge in view. "From this moment, all materials relevant to this case fall under federal protection. Anyone altering, deleting, or disclosing them externally will be subject to criminal penalty under Title 18. Section 1519. Richard attempted one last appeal. "Director, let's be reasonable. This is a family matter. We can compensate." Daniel met his eyes. "A family matter ended when your son struck mine. This is now a matter of record." He turned toward the doorway. "Bring her in." Emily entered, poised but quiet. She looked neither vindictive nor afraid. The owner stood automatically. Daniel's voice softened. "Ms. Torres, you'll give your statement under federal protection. You have the floor." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, with the calm of someone reclaiming her name, she said, "All I ever wanted was the truth to stop being optional." The words landed like verdicts. The power imbalance that had defined every room now reversed without spectacle. Titles shrank. Integrity stood taller. As Daniel gathered the signed acknowledgments, the projector screen faded to black, but the reflection of that frozen frame hand midair. Dignity unbroken lingered on the glass walls, proof that arrogance can bruise itself against evidence. The robe moment had arrived. Justice wasn't loud, it was precise. The Meridian's crisis moved from whispers to docket numbers. Within 48 hours of the compliance meeting, a joint notice arrived. Internal Review Case Number IR31-4, opened by the restaurant chain's Corporate Internal Affairs Division, cross-filed with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. The sterile phrasing disguised the storm underneath. To HR managers were placed on administrative leave pending inquiry. Their badges were deactivated before sunrise, laptops boxed by security. The owner entered digital access under warrant, his attorney citing full cooperation. A sealed envelope bearing Daniel's initials traveled to the Bureau's evidence archive inside it. A flash drive of recovered logs, each file a breadcrumb from concealment to exposure. Emily received her reinstatement letter next. It came by courier, printed on embossed stationery that smelled faintly of irony. Effective immediately. You are restored to active employment status with full back pay and benefits. The organization apologizes for any distress caused. A second page, signed by the chain CEO, declared that her employment record had been formally corrected. No corporate spin could undo the bruise, but the document felt heavier than paper proof that process could bend back toward fairness. Public statements followed. The Meridian posted an official apology to its website. We reaffirm our commitment to workplace dignity and transparency. Comment sections filled with disbelief, then slow recognition as receipts circulated. Screenshots of Carter's deleted edits reappeared through journalist archives. The pattern of privilege was no longer rumor. It was data. Meanwhile, legal machinery clicked into motion. The district attorney's office filed misdemeanor assault charges against Carter Vale. His father received a subpoena for obstruction of justice, citing interference with digital evidence. The Vale family's attorney issued a restrained press release about an unfortunate lapse in judgment magnified by social media. Court proceedings began in a pale marble courtroom under fluorescent scrutiny. Cameras waited outside but were banned within. Justice would speak in transcripts, not headlines. Carter sat behind counsel, the swagger gone, replaced by a posture rehearsed to look contrite. His attorney built a defense around emotional immaturity and public pressure. The judge listened without expression. Then Daniel's team presented their case. Forensic analysts detailed the deletion logs, explaining checksum mismatches and IP traces that pointed to the Vale Estates network. They spoke without moral flourish, just fact after verifiable fact. The silence that followed wasn't outrage, it was the sound of certainty. Emily testified last. She kept her voice steady, describing the event in measured detail, not accusation. I came to work that day to serve people, she said. I didn't expect to have to defend my right to be treated as one. The courtroom clerk noted her statement for record. Even the judge paused before moving on. Verdict came in the afternoon. The court found Carter Vale guilty of misdemeanor assault and complicit in the obstruction attempt. His sentence, 12 months probation, a $25,000 fine, mandatory ethics training, and 200 hours of community service, specifically at domestic violence shelters. No privilege exemption, no private substitutions. When the judgment was read, Richard Vale exhaled a fraction of disbelief. Daniel didn't look at him. He looked at the clerk stamping each page. Official, filed, sealed. Justice, by design, moves slower than anger, but arrives with permanence. Outside, reporters pressed microphones toward Emily. She declined comment, simply saying, "The system worked when people inside it remembered what it's for." That evening, Carter began his service hours. The first shift placed him in a shelter kitchen, ladling soup beside volunteers who didn't recognize him until later. There were no cameras, no PR handlers, only silence and consequence. At the bureau, Daniel signed the final interagency report, noting compliance closure. Under remarks, he wrote, "Noise fades, evidence endures." It was bureaucratic poetry, the kind that belongs to those who believe procedure can still be moral. The Meridian reopened the next week with new policies, incident recording protocols, independent audits, mandatory respect training. Each rule carried the residue of the night arrogance met accountability. No revenge had been taken, no spectacle staged. Justice had arrived the only way it ever should, documented, reviewed, and irreversible. Emily's voice came first, soft but clear, the kind of tone that doesn't need volume to command attention. Power isn't measured by who you can silence, she said, but by what you choose to protect. Her words lingered over quiet images, hands rinsing plates at the shelter sink. Carter's posture bent in concentration. Not shame but awakening. He worked without fanfare, hair tucked beneath a disposable cap, listening to the stories of the women who passed through the line, each one harder to ignore than the headlines that once excused him. Their lives weren't statistics or scandals. They were truths carried in plastic trays and whispered prayers. For the first time, he couldn't buy distance from consequence. Every hour there became a ledger of humility. In another part of the city, Daniel watched from across the street as Emily exited her nursing class, medical bag slung over her shoulder. She laughed with a classmate, the sound small but complete. Pride flickered across his face, not triumph. Just gratitude that justice could end quietly and still feel full. He turned away before she could see him. Narration continued in her words, titles fade. Wealth changes hands. But integrity, that's the one inheritance you can't counterfeit. The line echoed over a cityscape shifting from daylight to dusk. Glass towers reflecting the same sun that warmed corner diners and bus stops. The story didn't close on punishment. It closed on perspective. Justice had done its work, but redemption, slow and human, had begun its own. Emily looked ahead, unbroken, not defined by what happened but by how she stood through it. Integrity outlasts inheritance, she repeated, and in that quiet truth, the noise of the world finally fell still. Every act of dignity deserves a witness. If you've seen power abused, speak, record, report. Share this story to remind others that truth leaves receipts, and silence protects no one. Courage is contagious. Integrity multiplies when it's seen. Soft piano fades. End screen. Subscribe for true stories where courage meets justice.